Hey, it's Bill Ferriter. It's time for another 2-minute team tip. Oftentimes when I'm presenting with teams and teachers who are trying to learn how to collaborate with one another, they have a few really common misconceptions, and I want to address two of them with you today. The first is sometimes we believe that collaboration is about standardizing our instructional practices. It's about finding a way that we're going to teach an outcome, and then we all teach that outcome the exact same way. And the fact of the matter is that standardization really isn't a part of the work of high-performing teams. Sometimes standardization is the result of high-performing teams, but what we need to remember is that our goal while we're collaborating is to experiment with instruction. It's to tinker with our practices. It's to identify a strategy that we think has potential and then to refine and revise that strategy together. I'll try it one way, you try it another way, and then let's gather evidence to see which version of our strategy worked the best. See, I think that's experimentation with instruction, and to be perfectly honest, I think it's exciting. I enjoy that work, and I think most teachers do too, right? We're always thinking about new ways to teach important outcomes to kids. What we do on a collaborative team is we do that work together. Now, where does standardization play a role? Well, if I find a strategy that works really well to help English or students who are learning English as an additional language to master our essential, wouldn't you want to use it too? At least until we find something that's even better. Or if you find a strategy that works really well at helping our students who have IEPs, who struggle with written processing, to master one of our essential outcomes, wouldn't I want to steal that strategy too? See, we can't identify strategies that help students learn at higher levels if we're all teaching everything in the exact same way. We should be intentionally creating variety in our instructional practices so that we have a point of comparison, a way to evaluate, do our strategies work, and if so, for who? And can we find new versions of our strategy that work even better? That brings me to the second misconception that I think a lot of teachers have about collaboration. Sometimes we worry about looking at assessment data because we're worried that we might be judged by our peers. Like, if you get higher scores than I do, does that mean that I'm a bad teacher? Or if you get lower scores than I do, does that make you the bad teacher? The fact of the matter is, when we look at assessment results, it's really never about the teacher to begin with. I want you to keep in the back of your mind that assessment results are evidence of the efficacy of the instructional strategies that we chose to use. So if we get results that we aren't happy with, it isn't because we failed. Instead, it's because the strategy that we're working isn't as effective as we'd hoped. Does that make sense to you? It seems like wordsmithing. It seems like a word game, right? It wasn't you, it was your practice. But in the end, that makes looking at data safe. If we can all agree that what we're evaluating aren't our peers, but instead the strategies that our peers chose to use, then it makes looking at data a whole lot safer. So keep that in the back of your mind. It's never about the person, it's about the practice. And you really have to be on the lookout for it because we will all fall into the trap of saying, I did a terrible job on this assessment. Or, man, I was no good at teaching this to my kids. Right? We take things personally as teachers. We think that our instruction is who we are. I want to remind you, every time you hear those words and phrases, remind your peers that it had nothing to do with you. And it had everything to do with the strategy that you chose to use. We're not trying to identify good teacher and bad teacher. We're trying to identify effective strategy and ineffective strategy. Results that aren't where we want them to be aren't because we failed, but it's because the strategy that we're choosing to use isn't as effective as we'd hoped. Does that make sense to you? That's how you make approaching data feel more safe to everyone. All right, hope that made sense to you. Don't forget, if you have any questions, make sure you reach out and ask. I'd be happy to help. And don't forget to hit the like or subscribe button just in case you're interested in following along on future videos. Talk more soon.